When I was 22, I took a solo cross-country road trip right after college graduation. Just me, a dusty old Camry, and a few playlists filled with optimism. My route wasn't really planned. I was chasing sunsets and cheap gas. Somewhere in Arizona, about 40 miles off the interstate and running low on energy, I spotted a rusting sign that read, Desert View Motel, Vacancy. The sun was setting fast, painting the sky a sickly orange. The motel looked like it hadn't seen a paintbrush since the 70s. But I was too tired to be picky. I pulled into the cracked asphalt lot, grabbed my bag, and stepped into the office. Behind the counter was a man with deep-set eyes and yellowing teeth. He didn't say much, just handed me a key to room 8 after I gave him cash. No receipt, no ID asked. He just said, "Try not to wander." Odd, but again I was exhausted. Room 8 smelled like mildew and old cigarettes. The furniture was mismatched, a television with knobs, and floral curtains that hadn't been opened in years. I dropped my stuff, took a shower, and sat on the edge of the bed scrolling through my phone. No signal. Wi-Fi? Forget it. That's when I noticed it. A painting on the wall right above the small writing desk. It was a painting of the motel itself, strangely accurate, down to the cracked windows and busted sign. But there was one difference. In the painting, every window had a pair of eyes staring out. It wasn't obvious at first, but the more I looked, the more disturbing it became. Room 8 in the painting had the blinds open and a pale face looking directly at me. I chalked it up to bad art and tried to sleep. At around 2 a.m., I woke up to the distinct sound of the doorknob jiggling. Not violently, but like someone was gently testing it over and over. I stayed still.
No pole.
I turned the lights off and tiptoed to the window, sliding the curtain just enough to peek out. Nothing. Just the dim neon glow of the vacancy sign flickering. But when I looked at the painting again, it had changed. The face that was in room 8, it was now gone. In its place was an open curtain, just like the real one I'd just touched. A cold sweat broke over me. Trying not to panic, I turned on the old TV for noise. Static. Every channel. Then I saw movement in the screen, not a reflection. A flicker of someone standing in the corner of the room. Behind me. I spun around. Nothing. But the static shifted, and suddenly the motel painting was on the screen. Live. I could see the outside of my room from the same angle as the painting. Then the camera slowly zoomed in on my window. My curtain began to move. I snapped, grabbed my keys, shoved my shoes on, and bolted for the car. As I peeled out of the parking lot, I looked in the rearview mirror. The man from the front desk was standing under the flickering sign, just watching. Behind him, every room curtain in the motel had been pulled aside. Every single one. I never reported it. I didn't even stop driving until I hit California. I don't know if I imagined it, if someone was playing a cruel prank, or if that place was something much darker. But I will never, ever stay in a roadside motel again. Back in 2015, I worked as a night receptionist at a small roadside motel in upstate New York. It was a quiet job, mostly locals or exhausted travelers stopping over for a night. We had 13 rooms, and by midnight, it was rare to have more than 3 occupied. On a snowy Thursday in January, a man checked into room 12 just before my shift started. He was tall, clean-shaven, dressed in an outdated but neat brown suit. What stood out most were his eyes. Too wide, too bright. He didn't make small talk. Just handed me cash and said, "Room 12, please." I handed over the key and went back to restocking the coffee area. But I noticed something odd when I looked at the check-in log. He'd written the name Walter Dunn. Something about it rang a bell. Around 2 a.m., I got a call from room 12. The voice was barely a whisper. "Can you come up? Please." It was desperate and cracked with fear. I grabbed the master key and walked down the cold corridor. The snow outside had stopped, but a thick fog hugged the motel. When I reached room 12, I knocked gently. No response. I unlocked it and stepped in. The room was dark, the lights off, TV static buzzing faintly. But no one was inside. The bed hadn't been touched.
No bags.
No sign of anyone ever having entered. I stood there for a moment, completely still. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Why did you come in? I froze. The number was untraceable. The message was followed by another. Don't leave. Watch the mirror. That's when I noticed it, the mirror above the desk. From the angle I stood, it reflected not room 12, but the hallway. But it wasn't current. It was lagging. In the mirror, I saw myself still standing outside the door, about to enter. Then the reflection began to move on its own. Stepping into the room, the mirrored version of me walked to the bed, lay down, and stared at the ceiling. Another message. You're next. I bolted, shut the door, locked it, and ran back to the front desk. I checked the logs again. Walter Dunn. I Googled it, and that's when my blood ran cold. Walter Dunn had been murdered in that very motel. In room 12. In 1989, he was found lying on the bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. They never found his killer. Local legend claimed he still appeared to lone night staff or guests, reenacting his final hours. But never had he spoken before. I went back the next morning with the manager. Room 12 was clean, untouched. No sign of occupation. We closed the room permanently after that. But sometimes, even years later, I'd get a call on the motel phone from room 12. A whisper asking, "Can you come up?" We removed the room from the booking system, scrubbed it from maps. But somehow someone or something still checks in. And I still wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed to watch that mirror a moment longer. It was 2018 when my girlfriend and I took a road trip down the East Coast. We were trying to be adventurous, no reservations, just stop wherever we landed each night. By the time we reached North Carolina, we were too exhausted to keep driving. So we pulled into a small, slightly run-down motel on the outskirts of a town we didn't even know the name of. The clerk was an older woman who moved slowly and didn't make eye contact. She slid a key to room 6 under the glass window and muttered, "Don't put anything against the walls." It was a weird thing to say, but we laughed it off. Figured maybe the walls were thin or freshly painted. But once inside the room, we quickly noticed how dead silent everything felt. Not just quiet, *silent star. Like the air was muffled. Even the hum of the mini-fridge was absent. And the walls, they were covered in faint scratch marks. Not just a few, but dozens. Running vertically and diagonally, some deep enough to have chipped the paint. The bed was against the far wall. Out of curiosity, I moved the nightstand. More scratch marks. I looked at my girlfriend, and she shrugged, nervously joking, "Maybe raccoons with manners?" We turned in for the night, trying to shake it off. Around 1:30 a.m., we both woke up at the same time. No noise had woken us, we just woke up. The air in the room felt heavier, like we were underwater. Then came the sound. Scritch. Scritch. It was coming from the wall directly behind the headboard. We sat up. I leaned closer. The scratching was slow and deliberate, like fingernails dragging across plaster. Then it moved to the left wall. Then the right. It circled the room, scratching from inside the walls. My girlfriend whispered, "Maybe it's rats?" But it didn't sound like any rat I've ever heard. It sounded taller, more calculated. We got up, turned on every light, and moved the furniture away from the walls just to be safe. Then we sat in the middle of the room, backs pressed together, watching every surface. The scratching stopped for a moment. Then a single, loud bang came from the closet door. We hadn't opened it earlier. I walked over, heart pounding, and opened it. Empty. Just a short broom and a cracked mirror on the back wall. Then the lights went out. Pitch black. And that scratching started again, only faster. More urgent. The room echoed with the sound from every direction. Then we heard it, words, buried in the noise. Get out. Get out. We ran.
No shoes, no bags.
Just bolted out the door into the freezing night air. The next morning, when we returned with the police, room 6 looked different.
No scratch marks.
None. The walls were clean. The closet was empty, no mirror. It was like the room had reset. The officer, an older man, looked uncomfortable. You stayed in room 6? He asked. We nodded. He exhaled hard. That room was sealed last year. Some guy stayed there, complained about scratching all night. In the morning, they found him clawing at the walls with his bare hands. Said something was trapped in the walls and whispering his name. After that, they closed it off. We pointed out that the clerk had given us the room. But when we returned to the office, no clerk. No sign anyone had been there in days. The place was unlocked, unattended. A thick layer of dust covered the counter. To this day, I don't know who gave us the key, or what was scratching from inside the walls. But I know this, I'll never ignore weird warnings again. I was working as a traveling insurance adjuster back in 2012, which meant a lot of overnight stays in cheap motels across rural America. One night, I checked into a small, nondescript place just outside Springfield, Missouri. The sign out front simply said, Sunset Motor Lodge. It looked harmless enough. Just a single row of rooms and a dim office. The man at the front desk was unusually enthusiastic, offering a key to room 4 and saying, You'll be our only guest tonight, with a toothy grin. I didn't like that. Room 4 was clean but old. Beige walls, thin carpet, and the usual ancient air conditioner that rattled with every gust. It was fine, until I noticed the clock on the nightstand. It was stuck at 3:13. I tried to reset it, unplug it, even replace the batteries, but it wouldn't move. Always stuck on 3:13. I brushed it off as a cheap broken clock and got ready for bed. Around midnight, I dozed off to the muffled hum of the AC. Then I woke up. My watch said 3:13. Strange. The digital clock on the nightstand still showed 3:13, blinking faintly. I sat up and checked my phone, 3:13. Then came the knock. 3 slow knocks on the door. Not urgent, not angry, just patient. I froze. Another knock. Then a whisper. You in there? I got out of bed, grabbed the complimentary flashlight from my duffel, and moved to the door.
No pe pole.
The curtains were drawn, and I was too scared to peek. Then the whisper came again, this time closer. You're not supposed to be here. Something scraped across the door. I swear it sounded like fingernails, but longer. I called the front desk from the room phone. It rang once, then silence. I tried again. This time, a voice answered, You'll be fine if you don't open it. I hung up. My heart was pounding. I backed away from the door, sat on the bed, and waited. But nothing happened for the next hour. I must have fallen asleep at some point because I woke up to daylight streaming through the curtain. I checked the clock. 7:45 a.m. My phone confirmed it. Everything seemed normal again. Relieved, I packed up quickly and went to the front office to check out. The same man was there, sipping coffee like nothing happened. I asked, Did anyone else check in last night? He looked confused. Sir, this motel hasn't had another guest in 2 days. I told him about the knock, the voice, the clock stuck at 3:13. He nodded slowly. Room 4 has always done that. Ever since 1994. He pulled out an old guest ledger and showed me a page. In messy handwriting, 3:13 she came. Never opened the door. Asterisk asterisk apparently. A guest years ago reported a strange woman who knocked on his door at exactly 3:13 a.m. every night during his 3-night stay. When he opened the door on the last night, he was found the next morning unconscious, mumbling nonsense about black eyes and too many teeth. The motel staff now only gives room 4 to people who insist, and never for more than 1 night. They've tried fixing the clock, replacing the entire power system, but it always reverts back. Always 3:13. I left without finishing my coffee. I still travel a lot, but I never stay in motels if I can help it. And I never answer late-night knocks on my door. Back in the summer of 2007, I took a job refurbishing old motels across the Midwest. Our company specialized in renovations, paint, plumbing, light carpentry. We'd stay on site during the work, and that summer, our crew landed at a faded place in Kansas called the Maple Rest Inn. It was a typical 2-story roadside setup, except for one oddity. Room 10 had a locked utility closet no one ever used. Management told us it led to a sealed basement, something left over from when the place doubled as a storm shelter decades earlier. We didn't think much of it. One evening, after a long shift, I was staying in room 10 because the other units were being repainted. I set my toolbox down, took a shower, and was just about to call it a night when I heard a bang, coming from inside the closet. It wasn't a pipe or settling wood. It was rhythmic, intentional.
Bang.
Pause.
Bang bang.
Pause. Asterisk. I pressed my ear to the door. Faint whispers. Not in English. I called the manager, who came up reluctantly. She brought the key, opened the closet, and revealed a narrow staircase leading downward. "Don't go down there," she said flatly, locking it again. "Just ignore it." Of course, I didn't. Around 2 a.m., the banging came again. This time, louder, more urgent. Then I heard something new scraping, like something dragging across concrete. I couldn't take it. I found a screwdriver in my toolbox and picked the lock. The door creaked open, releasing a draft of stale, cold air that smelled like wet earth and rust. I went down. The steps were stone, narrow, and damp. At the bottom was a single room with concrete walls and an old metal table in the center. Chains hung from the walls, and strange symbols were carved into the floor. Then I saw the chair. It was wooden, bolted to the ground, and covered in deep gouges, like someone had tried to claw their way out. Suddenly, the door at the top slammed shut. I bolted up the stairs, heart pounding, only to find the closet wide open. No one there. No sound. Nothing. But when I got back to my room, there were muddy footprints, barefoot and small, leading from the closet to the foot of my bed. I slept in my truck that night. The next morning, I asked the manager again. This time, she gave me a real answer. In the 60s, when the motel was still new, a man had kept his daughter locked in that basement during tornado warnings. He was a religious fanatic, claimed the storms were the devil's harvest, and she needed to be purified. She died down there, chained to that chair. Ever since, room 10 had been known for weird noises, but most guests never noticed because the room wasn't rented often. Staff avoided it. After that week, I made sure I was never assigned to room 10 again. But I'll never forget those footprints, the size of a child's soaked in earth, and they ended right where I had been sleeping. It was the fall of 2003. I was driving through Oregon on my way to see my brother. I got a late start that day and was halfway through the mountains when fatigue hit hard. I needed a place to rest. A small glowing sign reading Pine Ridge Motor Inn appeared like a beacon through the trees. The parking lot was empty. Not just quiet, completely deserted. The lobby light was on, though, so I figured it was operational. Inside the front office stood a young man, maybe mid-20s, clean-cut, wearing a motel uniform. He looked off, too still, too stiff. But he smiled and welcomed me like nothing was strange. I filled out the form, paid in cash, and he handed me a key for room 2. "Don't answer the door after midnight," he said plainly. "Even if it sounds like someone you know." I asked him to repeat it, thinking I misheard, but he just smiled and said, "Enjoy your stay." Room 2 was normal. A little musty, but nothing unusual. I showered, watched some TV, and passed out by 11:30. Then, sometime after midnight, I heard knocking. 3 sharp raps. I sat up instantly. Then came a voice. "Hey, it's me. Open up, man." My car broke down. It was my brother's voice. But my brother lived 3 states away and had no idea where I was staying.
I said frozen.
Then the voice called again. "Seriously, open the door. I've been waiting out here forever." My skin crawled. I looked through the window's edge without pulling the curtain too far. No one was there. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. When dawn broke, I went straight to the office. But the lobby was dark. A sign on the door said, "Closed for renovation, reopens next season." Confused, I knocked and waited. A groundskeeper finally came by, surprised to see me. When I asked about the young man at the desk, he looked puzzled. "This place has been shut for months. No one's worked here since the fall. We've been cleaning it out for a reopening next year." I showed him the key and the receipt. He took both, turned pale, and told me to wait. When he returned, He had an old newspaper clipping in hand. It was about a former night clerk named Daniel Marsh, murdered in 1986 by a guest who claimed he was imitating voices from the dark. Room 2 was where the killer stayed, and every so often, travelers reported seeing a young man matching Daniel's description at the front desk, still checking people in, still warning them. I don't know what would have happened if I'd opened the door that night, but I'm grateful for the warning, however impossible it was. In 2011, I worked as a traveling photographer for a small magazine. I often ended up in forgotten corners of the country, staying in whatever cheap motels I could find. One of those was the Elk Trail Lodge, a peeling, L-shaped building nestled in the woods of northern Pennsylvania. It was eerily quiet. No traffic, no other guests, just an old woman at the front desk who checked me in without speaking a word. She handed me a key for room 5 and a note. If the maid knocks, don't let her in, even if she has towels. I almost laughed. I thought it was a joke, maybe even a quirky local legend meant to spook city folk like me. But the room was clean and I was tired. I unpacked my camera gear, edited some shots, and went to bed. At exactly 3 a.m., someone knocked. "Housekeeping," a woman's voice sang. Cheerful, sweet, but it was 3 a.m. I froze in bed. "Housekeeping," she said again. "I have clean towels." I quietly got up, tiptoed to the door, and peered through the peephole. The hallway was empty. No woman.
No card.
Nothing. I waited, heart pounding. Then I heard it again. Asterisk from the bathroom star. "Housekeeping." I burst into the bathroom. No one. Then the knocking came again, this time from inside the closet, followed by soft giggling. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat with the light on, shaking. The next morning, I told the front desk woman what happened. She sighed and handed me a yellowed list. Names, dates, room numbers, all with the same note scribbled next to them. "Let her in." I asked what it meant. She finally spoke. "Some guests, they think it's funny. They open the door. The housekeeper, she was real once. Died here in a fire back in the 80s. She still thinks she has work to do." She tapped the list. "Everyone who let her in disappeared. We only find their things. Never them." I left immediately. Didn't even ask for a refund. A year later, I checked back online out of curiosity. The motel had been shut down. Arson. Total loss. The article listed the names of the guests staying there at the time of the fire. 3 of them were on that list I was shown. I never found out who the housekeeper was. But every now and then, in the middle of the night, I swear I hear a woman's voice outside my apartment door. "Housekeeping. I have towels." I was doing a long-haul trucking route through the Midwest in 2019 when a snowstorm forced me off the highway in Indiana. The roads were slick, visibility was near zero, and I found shelter in a motel called High Pines Inn. It was one of those single-row motels, about 10 rooms total, almost swallowed by surrounding pine trees. I was given room 3 by a man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His hands trembled as he handed me the key. "Don't cover the mirror," he said with a forced smile. "Whatever you do, don't put anything in front of it." Room 3 was simple, warm enough, but right above the desk was an enormous antique mirror. The kind with silver backing starting to flake around the edges. Something about it felt wrong. I couldn't see my reflection clearly. It was me, but not quite. The timing was slightly off. When I raised my hand, the reflection lagged by a second. I tested it over and over. Same result. But I was tired. The storm raged outside, and I figured maybe it was a warped pane or trick of the lighting. That night, I fell asleep watching TV, fully clothed, lights on. Sometime after 2 a.m., I woke up cold. The lights were off. The TV was static, and the mirror was glowing faintly, as if catching moonlight that wasn't there. Then it moved. Not me, the reflection. It stood up. I was still in bed, but in the mirror, I saw myself standing at the foot of the bed, watching me. I sat up, trembling. The reflection didn't move. I reached for my phone to turn on the flashlight, but the moment I looked back, the reflection was gone. The mirror was dark. I grabbed a towel and threw it over the mirror. I didn't care what the clerk said. Immediately, the air turned heavy. The lights flickered. I heard a whisper, "You're not supposed to do that." Then pounding on the walls, on the floor, and from inside the mirror. The towel lifted itself and crumpled in midair, dropping to the ground. And there, in the mirror, I was gone. Something else stood there, tall, shadowed, with my face but too wide, too grinning. It mouthed something I couldn't hear. Then slowly, it pressed its hand to the glass from inside. I screamed and ran to the front desk, barefoot, in the snow. The clerk didn't even act surprised. He just shook his head and said, "Told you not to cover it. That mirror came with the motel. Nobody knows where it came from, but every time someone hides it, it punishes them." He handed me a hot drink and added, "You got off easy. The last guy tried to break it. They never found him." I left before sunrise, refusing the refund. I still don't know what that thing was. But I do know this: a mirror should never move before you do. My aunt was a paramedic in the late 90s, working overnight shifts in the rural outskirts of Montana. One evening, she and her partner were stationed at a regional outpost near an old highway, with nothing but a broken vending machine and a beat-up landline in the dispatch room. Around 1:45 a.m., the phone rang. Not the emergency line, the old rotary motel phone on the wall that hadn't worked in years. She picked it up. "Room 7, said a woman's voice. Calm, measured. "There's too much blood. Please send help." Confused, my aunt radioed the local sheriff's office while her partner pulled out the map. The only motel in the area was the Rest Hollow Inn, about 6 miles away. It had been condemned and shuttered since a fire in '91. They went anyway. When they arrived, the place was in shambles. Shuttered windows, no power. But room 7 still had a door barely hanging on its hinges. They entered. Inside was a dusty, rotted mess.
No furniture.
No bed, just a pile of ash and charred floorboards. My aunt's partner moved toward the window while she examined the far wall and saw something carved into the soot-covered plaster. "Call 1:45 a.m. Too much blood." Then her radio hissed violently. A new voice, her own voice, crackled through. "Room 7. There's too much blood. Please send help." They got out fast. The next day, the sheriff confirmed there had never been any working phone lines connected to the old building since the fire. That fire, it turns out, had killed a woman who had locked herself in room 7 after a violent altercation with a former lover. She bled out. Authorities estimated she died around 1:45 a.m. And yet somehow, more than a decade later, that room had managed to call for help, using a phone that didn't work. My aunt never went back. Years later, after she retired, she told me that every once in a while, at exactly 1:45 a.m., her home phone would ring just once and then stop. Caller ID would read room 7. She eventually changed her number, but once in a while, she still wakes up at exactly 1:45 without knowing why, as if something's still trying to get through. It was 2016, and I was working night security for a budget motel chain in Nevada. The place was pretty typical: 30 rooms, bad lighting, and more strange guests than I cared to remember. But nothing ever came close to what happened my 3rd week on the job. It started with the ice machine. We had one, located in a narrow alcove between rooms 17 and 18. One night, a guest from room 19 came down to the front desk, pale and trembling. "There's a man in the ice machine," he said, barely above a whisper. I asked what he meant. He insisted he heard banging, like someone was trapped inside. "He said my name," the man added. We both walked to the machine. It was humming like usual. I lifted the lid, half expecting a prank or maybe a squirrel. But there was nothing inside, just ice. Still, I logged it, wrote a maintenance report, figured the guest had been drinking. 2 nights later, another guest, different room, same story, said he heard breathing, wet breathing, coming from inside the machine. When I checked again, same result. But this time, the ice was melting rapidly, like the temperature had dropped. We shut the machine down and called the regional manager. He brushed it off as an old compressor acting up. The next day, While cleaning the area, a housekeeper found something lodged deep inside the back vents of the machine. It was a tooth. Not old. Fresh. Human. Police were called. They dismantled the unit. Inside, behind layers of ice, they found more 3 teeth, a bone fragment, and strands of hair. DNA tests later confirmed they belonged to a man named Joel Manners, a transient who'd gone missing a year earlier. He had last been seen at our motel. Security footage had long since been wiped due to outdated systems. No employee remembered checking him in. No one remembered seeing him leave. They ruled it undetermined circumstances. The machine was replaced. Management installed cameras and ordered stricter check-in logs. But it didn't stop. Guests kept reporting whispers near the ice machine. Some said they saw a pale hand reaching out when they lifted the lid. One kid said a man with no eyes told him, "It's cold in here. I quit after my final night. Around 3 a.m. I went to restock towels. As I passed the alcove, the new ice machine let out a sharp metallic groan. I glanced over and saw a face, pressed against the inside of the lid, just for a second. Eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream, frost covering his skin. Then it was gone. I don't know who or what is in that machine now, but I've never used one since. Not at motels. Not at gas stations. Not anywhere. Because sometimes, when you reach into a bin of ice, something might grab you back."